Hi, I'm Taylor Kurtz, and this is SEO in 2025.
Taylor, what's your number one SEO tip for 2025?
My number one SEO tip is to begin looking at artificial intelligence as an ally and not an enemy or a competitor.
Okay, so why might AI be an enemy or a competitor?
I think a lot of people, whether you're a search engine themselves like Google, who potentially felt threatened by the release of things like ChatGPT and its surge in popularity, or you're someone that focuses on the content side of SEO or marketing and you're afraid, who's going to want me to write when AI can just do it for them. Or if you're just an SEO looking, how can I kind of utilize AI to not just further my efforts, but save me tremendous time, allowing me to focus on what will really move the needle.
So how do you turn it into an ally?
The first thing I want to mention, because I use it all the time and it's not necessarily marketing related, but one thing that just saves tremendous time and allows me to be more engaged in meetings and things like that is I use tools for automated note taking, which I think is great. But the big way I've turned AI into an ally, as mentioned, is just saving me time. And I feel like in the SEO world, a lot of tasks we do are not necessarily difficult, but redundant, monotonous, tedious. Good examples would be, if we're launching a series of pages, just writing meta descriptions for them, generating schema markup, or for instance, scouring stock photo images for an appropriate photo for this blog, in which case I've utilized, AI generated graphic creation. It'll produce a completely, original image based on whatever it is you are looking for. But those are I would say much more the monotonous tasks. And then another big way that saves probably the most time is digging into data. When looking for trends, you're constantly bouncing back between different graphs and Search Console and analytics and different tools, and you have 30 windows open. I still add my individual quote unquote expert eye on it, but I'll plug reports in all the time into various AI tools, and it'll kind of identify the trends for me that I would have spent hours digging into. And then of course I go look at them, I verify, I'm like, oh, that's correct. I dig deeper from there, but it saves me the initial, I always think of it as like a sand sifter, throwing all this data in there and what's important and what stays. So kind of sifting the sand for me, which can take many hours, and kind of letting me get down to the nitty gritty and the nuts and bolts of everything.
So what AI are you talking about using here? Are you just talking about ChatGPT?
So it really depends. For specifically generating schema markup, meta descriptions, like I mentioned, things of that nature, I feel like the SEO community is kind of at war with Google sometimes, but I really enjoyed using Gemini. Beyond that, I use ChatGPT here and there, but I like Gemini a lot. I like Bing's Copilot. I use something called Dolly, kind of like Wall-E, the movie, but with a D, the hyphen and everything. That's an image generator. The note taker I mentioned is called Fireflies, fireflies.ai. And then I've used another one called Claude, CLAUDE.ai, which is kind of a document summarization. And even beyond that, AI being integrated in the tools we use every day. Google Analytics 4 has started to incorporate it more, as well as SEMrush. And with SEMrush, it's great because you can kind of utilize it to get as more customized or specific to the project you're working on SEO insights.
So because you've used so many different tools, it would be great to actually get a flavor of what you think the pros and cons of each one is for different tasks. So how would you rate each one for different types of tasks?
I think ChatGPT just was so fresh and new. It caught everyone's eye. And I will admit I have not used their paid version, but I think that it's kind of one of the lesser options, because last I saw its database only went back to 2021. So you don't necessarily, whereas Gemini or Bing, you could ask them about something that happened yesterday and it'll have information. And more importantly, especially if you're using it at all to assist with content or give you ideas, you want to make sure what you're putting out there is accurate. And so with Bing and Google's versions of that, they include the links and the citations to what they are using or what they're referencing, whereas ChatGPT is kind of have to take it at face value and have trust. So I would say Gemini and Copilot are superior to ChatGPT. The image generator, if you want very specific images, basically a good example is I tried uploading a picture of my baby and asked it to show me what it would look like in 10 years. I don't know if that's necessarily an accurate thing, but if you're just saying give me a picture of a marketer stressing about an algorithm update or something like that. It'll produce that. So I think, and then you don't have to worry about, someone falling about using their image or using an image that's on hundreds of other sites, completely original. I don't really have any drawbacks as far as the note taker. I guess at some points, if like there's a bad connection, or I've had it where a person on the call is on the go, so they're breaking up, that can cause some interference. But overall, it's been very, very, very helpful. Because then a lot of times, like I'm typing so fast, I'm half listening, just trying to keep up with the typing. So it allows me to be much more fully engaged and make sure I'm, checking all the boxes as far as whatever I'm attending is.
So when you talk about using AI for client communication, I'm assuming that you're not using AI to create emails to clients. It's more about reports for clients, is it?
To an extent, but I'll say this. So with my company, Crush the Rankings, other than offering, ideally excellent SEO, the one area we always wanted to put ourselves apart was client communication, and never having the question, wonder kind of where's their money going. And so part of that is whenever there's a big shift, like a big news update, or whether it be an algorithm update, I thought the antitrust one was worthy. I often will send an email to all of my clients, kind of, here's what's happening, letting them know, before they hear it from someone else, we are aware of this, we're on top of it. So lately, and they're pretty long and thorough emails with links to articles discussing it and things like that. So a lot of times now what I've been able to do is essentially I'll tell Gemini or a tool, hey, Google released this update yesterday. I'm intending on emailing all my clients, and these are the points I want to cover. Can you put that email together? And I'll kind of tweak it and modify it to our own kind of vision. But that allows me, instead of, debating wording and things like that, I can then go find, like I said, those articles that I want to reference to if the client wants to learn more, things like that. So I don't use it for like automated emails by any sense, but whenever it comes to a long email, which is more so informative than unique to that specific client, then I've definitely found it to be helpful there.
So what about for reporting? I mean, will you do things like, for example, ask it to analyze different reports, then come up with a paragraph or two to summarize what's happening?
No, I prefer to keep like every month on the first of the month, I client by client hand make all these emails, reports, letting them know, here's how the month went, here's how it compared to last month, etc. So what I still like to do that. I'm so hands-on with the projects. I like to go in and kind of look at certain metrics that I've been focused on myself and put them together. But a lot of times what I have done is I'll put my reports together and run it through there and just see, is there anything I missed?
So is it largely content creation that you're finding yourself using AI for?
I use it the most for kind of those tasks I talked about, like, hey, here's the new page we built. What schema would you recommend? Can you generate that? And putting it on the back end, or I'm publishing these pages with these topics and titles. Can you write me in 160 characters or less a thorough meta description? So really the tasks that are not difficult, it's just tedious. And, a lot of us SEOs, we've done it thousands and thousands of times. So it's nice to let someone else take the wheel and then we just kind of review. As far as content creation, I don't rely, I've never had any AI tool write a page or an article and just put it up. I'll often say that, because I like to write with outlines and then kind of build the outline out. So I'll often say, I'm writing a very thorough article on this. I want no stone unturned. Here's what I'm already discussing. What else could I touch on? And it to kind of make sure that I use AI basically to build the skeleton sometimes of the content before the writers then go put the meat on the bones.
So is there any sector that you're finding to be particularly suitable for the use of AI?
Before I do that, I'll kind of answer the opposite question of the sector that I think is least suited to it, which would definitely be legal. And I don't want to say least suited, but will require that, or maybe medical, the most hands-on editing, reviewing, things like that, because you can't have a situation where you are describing a law or you link to a statute of a law and it's inaccurate. So because beyond that, you could also run into, issues with your governing body or the bar that you're a part of for putting out poor information. And the same thing with medical. You don't want something where people read it and think, oh, it's online, and then they're in a worse situation than they were. Those are the two that I think are it's least suited for. But beyond that, I work right now with a big commercial cleaning company, as well as, let's say, a coffee company with shops throughout the country. So I think those are much more broad topics where you still need to be accurate, but the level of knowledge is much more surface level than if you're discussing a certain kind of medical procedure or a certain niche area of the law. Like that's where I've really found it to be helpful, is kind of those more general, I guess general is not the word, but like industries where you don't necessarily need to go to law school or medical school or have that kind of really fine level of knowledge.
Yeah, industries that don't need compliance to actually review content before you publish it, basically.
That would be a good one. And again, like I said, I've never taken an article from AI and published it. I've definitely used it, I would say more so as like inspiration and just making sure the article we're putting together is as thorough as possible.
And it's certainly possible using AI to get a very thorough article produced. Occasionally, you do get a hallucination, though. How do you deal with that? How do you find issues which aren't factually correct, and how do you make sure that you don't miss any?
Well, like I said, a lot of what I do for AI is more so what topics should I discuss in this article, kind of, which will then become essentially like header twos or something, give me the sections, then we will write it. But an article where I've had it like write something extensive and I'll send it to a writer like, hey, this is information that we want to, personalize and put an expert touch on. But we've definitely seen it where, again, with law, it'll cite the wrong statute or things like that. So I just think with AI, one of the biggest, as far as the do's and don'ts, is you cannot just have like a set it and forget it kind of mentality. You need to have the human touch. But I also think it's important to understand that with things like ChatGPT or Bing or Google's version, it's essentially like a learning module where the more you or people interact with it, the more refined it gets. So it's important for you as a marketer or anyone utilizing it to kind of keep up with your own like quote unquote training. You need to start to learn the most effective, like they call it like prompt engineering, how to most effectively prompt the search engine to get what the end result you're looking for is. And beyond that, staying up to date with new advancements and things like that.
Yeah, but I like the way that you're essentially saying, start with the tedious elements of your website, start with generating page titles and meta descriptions, and then use it as a research buddy to actually maybe have conversations with to establish what your piece of content should be about. But I guess the very last thing you should be considering AI is creative content, actually getting it to write a full article by itself. Is that a reasonable summary?
Yeah, I would say AI, the way I use it, is a lot of things, but it's not a content writer.
If an SEO is struggling for time, what should they stop doing right now so they can spend more time doing what you suggest in 2025?
I feel like the AI thing is very hit or miss. And there's so many people, which just got slammed by the hundreds of thousands in, I believe, March, that were just spamming out AI content. And then all of a sudden, in March, they all got manual penalties that were removed. So that's why like it's not a set it and forget it thing. So if you're doing that, don't do that. But if you really want to save time, to me, don't focus on like manual backlink acquisition. I kind of discussed this last year as well, but I feel like if you're focused on putting out whatever topic you're writing on, the best information on that, like the goal is if someone lands on this and they have any interest or question about it, they have no need to leave the page. It's all covered. And so if you can focus on putting out that thorough expert level content, like I say, leave no stone unturned, that will naturally bring the backlinks because you will have the most valuable, information on there. And the backlinks it will bring will typically be a lot more valuable and trusted than if you're constantly manually reaching out to various entities, which is incredibly time consuming. So I think that for me, focus more on what you're providing the user and what value you can offer the end user, and focus less on how do I get in this directory or get these backlinks. Because if you focus on the right things as far as content goes, user experience, and just provide, like I said, a valuable resource, those links will come naturally. And those to me are the best links.
I mean, I can certainly understand that from a more established site perspective, but I mean, surely for younger sites that have less links to begin with, you need to seed great articles a little bit to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, for instance, if you launch a new site, it's a local business, I definitely spend some time getting local citations and local backlinks and things like that. But for any website that has kind of established that baseline of authority and is looking to grow, focus on the value you can provide, not the value a backlink might provide your site. But you are like, yeah, I'm not saying to completely neglect backlinks. It's very much a case-by-case thing, for sure.
Taylor Kurtz is owner and founder of Crush the Rankings, and you can find him over at crushtherankings.com. Taylor, thanks so much for being part of SEO in 2025.
Thank you.
I've been your host, David Bain. Get your copy of SEO in 2025, the book, over at SEOin2025.com.